As if we weren't all sick of hardware news and graphics card crap and all this shit taking place lately, you know, as if things could get worse. Oh, you guys have probably already heard the news. Now, apparently, if you install your AMD graphics card this way, it's gonna overheat.
Hey, Jay. Jay. Jay.
What?
We got work to do.
Yeah, I'm playing World of Warships. Yeah. World of Warships is the free-to-play naval strategy game where you command the most iconic and famous warships from World War I and World War II, recreated with stunning detail and accuracy. Build your fleet while participating in various game types while upgrading your ship's arsenal along the way. New players who sign up using my link below will receive an exclusive starter pack to get you up and running quickly by receiving 7 days premium time, 1 million credits, 300 doubloons, and the Tier 5 premium ship, the Exeter.
So what are you guys waiting for?
Start sinking ships with World of Warships by heading to the description below and getting your freebies.
All right, if you guys have no idea what I'm talking about right now, this is like something that started gaining traction and there was a lot of theories about why this could be happening. What I'm referring to specifically is the reference model cards from AMD, like the XTX, the 7900 XTX and XT being mounted vertical, being perfectly fine regarding temperatures, and then mounting it horizontal, seeing it hit hotspot temps of 110°C and then throttling itself down a lot because it apparently will continue to just run away with thermals until it just completely throttles itself down to nothing. Now, I believe Steve at Gamers Nexus has talked about this. I know Steve at Hardware Unboxed has talked about this. Igor's Lab has talked about this, but Doubloons came out with a video just the other day. I'll put a link to it down below and we'll be referencing it during this video. It seems to be an issue more so specifically with the reference cards, but I do believe he made reference to a custom card. I can't remember which brand it was. Anyway, it's in his video that I think there was a custom card that was having a problem. The thing is, there have been reports of some of them overheating and hitting 110° hotspot on vertical mount, some of them on horizontal mount, a couple of them even on a different mount where they lean back more in a reverse vertical because of different like fractal mounting kits and stuff for custom cases. And so he basically had his audience send him one of each type that was starting to show these bad temperatures in different orientations. Now the leading theory was, if you've never held one of these cards, they're very heavy. That's because there's a very dense fin stack in here. There's a very thick cooling plate. It is a vapor chamber cooler. So the way vapor chambers work, in a very layman's term, is you have heat pipes, and those heat pipes are filled with a liquid that as it gets hot turns into a vapor and will extend itself to the exterior, or the furthest point away from the heat source, wicking heat away. As it cools in the cooler farther away from the heat source, it turns back into a liquid, moves back to the center, and just repeats this process. It's actually like a heat wicking technique. Anything with a heat pipe is also a vapor chamber. And that's the way that things have been kind of working now for a long, long time. Now the vapor chambers inside the coolers that you'll find on like Founders Edition graphics cards from NVIDIA, or even these cards from AMD, several generations back, both NVIDIA and AMD, you can't see the heat pipes because they're kind of in an enclosed, sort of a thick plate, and it all just sort of is inside. So you can't really see what's happening there. But what's happened is they found that with it in a vertical orientation, which is a standard mount. Like this is just, you've got a normal case, you just plug it into your motherboard, you're not using a vertical mount like this, just a horizontal mount sitting here in your case, normal, that the card over time, and you can see some of these charts right here, and again, we are referencing Doubloons' video, please go watch his whole video. He kind of drives you through all of his testing methodology and all the time it took to test these different theories, that the card and the cooler was somehow pulling, like gravity was pulling the cooler away from the die. Now he was able to debunk that theory in a couple of different ways. One, he simply took it, put it on a riser cable, made a mount to just put the cooler on, and now gravity is no longer an issue because the cooler is being supported by the mount he made to just hold it. And the issues were exactly the same. Another theory that he had was that tension was a problem, that maybe there's not enough tension. Now remember, AMD's always had some very interesting mounting techniques and thermal interface material. Remember the graphite pads that they were using? So the theory was that maybe the mounting tension wasn't good enough. and that being mounted like this, a little bit of a combination of gravity plus maybe that pad being pulled away was a problem. So he had to test that, because once the problem displayed itself being mounted like this, if gravity did kind of pull that pad apart some, it could have created gaps in the cooling on that. And remember, the hotspot is just the hottest sensor on the die. It could be any of them. So he had to basically debunk that theory by repasting the card. He used I'm sure he's used his own thermal grizzly paste, which is very good, by the way. We've seen drops of like 5C by just using his paste. Not an ad, just a note for you guys. By doing the washer mod on the backside of the PCB to pull the cooler closer, because remember, the screws will bottom out so that you don't crush the PCB by just over tightening the plate. So by adding a washer to the back means it can pull the cooler tighter on the die before it bottoms out the screw. It had no difference whatsoever. There are mounting like standoffs too that he ground down also to get it as tight as possible. He created so much tension on the board was bowing under, and he was like, no one should ever in any circumstance ever put this much mounting pressure on the die, because you could actually damage the die.
Like, the mounting pressure was insanely high. And again, in testing, it did not change anything.
So basically he deduced through all of these different techniques that there has to be something wrong with the vapor chamber. Now I'm gonna tell you right now, our 7900 XTX does not exhibit this behavior. All of our testing is done in its horizontal position. This is not something we've ever had to think about before, is what orientation is your card in that could affect temperatures. It's something we're definitely gonna have to keep an eye on moving forward, because, you know, until a problem presents itself, it's not something you ever consider. So now there's been this problem presented. Now, Der Bauer shows by taking the card apart that the vapor chamber has kind of a weird pathing through it. And it's not known yet what is causing the quote unquote vapor lock. I'm dubbing it vapor lock. It's probably not the correct term. I know Steve has talked about phenomenon, not really a phenomenon, but a scientific fact in the past that if a vapor chamber becomes overwhelmed, that the wicking process stops. And if the wicking process stops, the entire cooling design of your vapor chamber cooler stops. Therefore, temperatures will start to move out of control. Now, one of the ways that Der Bauer was able to sort of identify that the vapor chamber is more than likely the problem here is by taking a known bad card and putting it in a vertical mounting position like this and running his test, and his graph of temperature over time, it completely normalizes in like the mid 80s to low 90s, which is not terrible, but not great. Everything's fine with the terrible card. And then if he moves it while the test is running to a horizontal position, within 10 minutes, it is throttling itself down significantly. And you'll see, looking at the chart, it's a linear runaway of temperature. It takes about 10 minutes to get there, but it also takes that much time for the vapor effect to start losing its efficacy because of whatever is happening in the vapor chamber. So you'll see this sort of a very linear straight line, not a curve, a straight line up to 110 where it levels out, because that's where the throttling takes place. But after rotating it back and leaving it horizontal, the temperatures never came back down. If he was to take it off of load, let the card cool off, and then run it again in vertical, it was fine. So that's where it was obviously something happening in the vapor chamber. Now, this is something I wish that I could investigate with my own card, but like I can tell you right now, we've even showed you guys in our overclocking video, although we saw weirdness where as we would push the clocks higher, it would show 100% load, high clocks, high utilization, but the scores would just continue to drop. That's a totally different issue, but you can see our temperatures were up and visible during that entire test, and they were always sitting in the 80s, low 90s, high 80s, even when overclocked. So our card, and it's funny because other reviewers tend to not be having this problem. Now, it's important to remember, these cards that we receive from the manufacturers, both NVIDIA and AMD, these are not technically retail cards. These are the first production sample run. That's why I don't even have, you notice there's no sticker on the back of this card. I mean, there is one right here, but a lot of the times you'll notice there's stickers on the back that have a serial number and all that stuff. That's because these are the tests that they run prior to production for full retail. And this is where they do all the checks on the say, is everything kosher? Did everything look right? Is everything working? Is everything tooled properly? It's kind of a two birds with one stone. They have to manufacture these cards anyway to make sure everything's working, and then they send them to us for review, because then they can at least make marketing returns on these cards, which they can't sell. Which makes me wonder if something happened or something changed in the manufacturing of the XTX and probably to a shorter extent the XT, but we're focusing on the XTX, that's the one I know about having this problem, between then and retail production. Devourer was able to find something like 43 or 45, I know it was in the 40s, confirmed cases of cards that are hitting 110C hotspot and throttling really hard. In fact, I've received a couple of messages of folks saying, hey, I'll hit 110C hotspot, is that normal? It's kind of funny because initially, 110 is not that weird. Let me back up. I'm not defending the problem, but I can tell you that when RDNA 1 and RDNA 2 came out, seeing 100 to 105, we even did a video where we saw 108 on one of our cards, was not, we were told specifically by AMD, that is in the realm of normal. And so it wasn't that odd to us. The difference between those cards and this card is those cards didn't start throttling heavily at those temperatures. 110C is the max, the TJ max on the hotspot. But by seeing these cards hit the 110C and then throttle hard tells us that temperature is attempting to go well beyond 110C. It would probably hit 115, 120, and probably continue to run away and melt itself until a thermal protection shutdown happens, because the cooler at that point is not providing cooling. The vapor chamber is not working at that point. And I'm dubbing this vapor lock. I'm wondering if, and I started to talk about this, I think Steve at Gamers Nexus is the one that talked about the fact that there is an issue known where certain vapor chambers become overloaded, that they completely lock up and stop working. And I'm calling that vapor lock because it's very similar to if you have, well, let's talk about the old 60s cars and carbureted cars in the summer and whatnot, and you have fuel lines running right next to exhaust manifolds and such, where that fuel starts to vaporize. It goes from a liquid to a gas and then no longer can move. It becomes completely locked in a new state of matter that cannot be moved. And the same thing is technically happening with the vapor chamber, theoretically. This is one of those things where like, AMD has not really responded to this. And it's funny because a lot of folks hold AMD as this like hero, like the Dark Knight of Gotham, and just like, it's the hero we need, you know? And AMD's not perfect. And AMD has been mum about this. And you know what? Not only has AMD come up short with many of its promises to really compete against NVIDIA. I'm gonna throw Scott Herkelman under the bus here. At the Las Vegas event, at the like mixer dinner thing, he got on stage and basically was like, I can't wait to kick NVIDIA's ass tomorrow, and got everyone hyped up, and we were like, that's bold. Not to just say we're gonna kick NVIDIA's ass, but to say that knowing you fell short. Now let's talk about custom cards for a second here. Custom cards are really not affected by this much, unless they have their own cooler issues that are completely separate from this. Whether it be, you know, a Zotac, not a Zotac card, but a Red Devil card like this, you know, you got your Power Color card, you got your Sapphire card, you got your XFX card, you got all your usual players with AMD cards. Their cooler designs are their own designs, right? They've been making their own coolers for a long time. They kind of know what they're doing. It feels like every generation with AMD, they kind of come up with a new design that then is manufactured specifically for their cards. I don't know who they source out or internally use to design these vapor chambers and stuff. I'm sure they've got experts that they reach out to that are in the cooling industry. Clearly there's a defect here. Now, it's a defect that is widespread enough for me to recommend stay away from the reference card if you can even find it anyway. I mean, I'm talking on hypotheticals here that you can even find cards in stock at a price worth buying. Stay away from this card until AMD speaks up and says something. It's funny because AMD took every opportunity it could to kind of say, NVIDIA, do the right thing, man, with your connectors, speak up. Mum's been the word about this one. So like when the shoe's on the other foot, AMD really isn't exactly those also willing to stand up and be like, uh-oh, we have a problem. That could also be because they're also waiting to get enough of these back to figure out what the problem is. But even to say, we're aware of a problem, we're looking into it, when you don't even say that, at least at the time of making this video, it looks bad for you. So my recommendation, if you're considering getting a 7000 series card, get a custom PCB card, a custom manufacturer, whether it be Power Color, Sapphire, XFX, you know, whoever, whatever. There's so many brands now, I don't even know. At a time when graphics cards are already a commodity, during inflation, being scalped still and overpriced, this is just not the kind of shit you need. Anyway, guys, go and watch Devouer's video, please. He put a lot of work, a lot of effort into finding this issue, and even he agrees, like, this is not the time to just be quiet about it. I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about AMD. AMD needs to speak up and say something about this. I would absolutely love If anyone local to SoCal has a 7900 XTX that is indeed hitting 110 degrees hotspot in the horizontal position, or any position for that matter, I would love for you to reach out to me. I'd like to test your card and see what we can figure out, and compare it to mine. Because I'm telling you right now, the reviewers don't seem to have this problem. And it makes us look bad too, all of us. All the Steves that are out there, and the Pauls and the Linuses and the Jays and the Kyles, because if our cards don't do it and we don't mention it and you guys buy one and it's a widespread problem that everyone's talking about, it looks like we covered it up, but it's not happening for us. And that's 10 times more frustrating to have people tell us we're covering up for a company when I'm with you. Like, this is not acceptable. So, AMD, speak up, say something. At least let us know that you are hearing that there's a problem. I think the problem is they are not in a position to recall these.